Hey guys, my name is Mike Carleo, and this is my first installment on my How to Build Your Chops playlist. And today, I'm going to be speaking about the 3, 4, and 5 note patterns while doing pentatonic scales. Now, a great way I like to build my chops is to be able to do my pentatonic scales in all different types of ways. And adding these 3, 4, or 5 note patterns makes my brain think differently and thusly makes the scale harder. So, let's get started. So let's start with a 3 note pattern. Now we're going to play our pentatonic scale in A minor, so we're going to play the first box, which starts on the 5th fret. Right now I'm going to play the conventional way just to get my fingers ready. So. Now the 3 note pattern obviously connects 3 notes together, and the 3 notes are going to be in a 8th note triplet rhythm. And the way I like to explain the 8th note triplet rhythm is to use food groups. So I use food groups with all my rhythms with my students. So the triplet rhythm would be called chocolate. So I use the word chocolate, and we all love chocolate, so this helps us remind us of the triplet. So chocolate, chocolate, chocolate. You can also use 1 triplet, 2 triplet. But food groups really gets the point across. So we're going to be building off of each scale degree. So each scale degree will have a set of triplets together. So you would start with the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, and then you go back and start on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and then 3rd, 4th, and 5th, 4th, 5th, and the octave, which is the 1, and then 5th, 1, and 2, or the 9th. So, and you do this all the way up the scale, and then you would turn it back around. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Now when I get up to the top note, I like to repeat that top note to turn it back around to keep the symmetry. So now obviously I'm going to be doing all alternate picking. And then when we get to the other patterns, you can also do economy picking or stick with strictly alternate picking. So here's the scale in its entirety. Okay, so now you can be able to move in all of your shapes, all 5 shapes of the pentatonic scale, and be able to apply the same type of pattern. And obviously the different shapes are going to have different fingerings, which makes those scales harder as well. So it's very, very important to practice this with the metronome to make sure you're not rushing and you're not slowing down. So I would start off very slow, around 60 beats per minute or even slower, and then I would try to increase the speed, and then you can start working on not only your time, but eventually your chops. So that's the 3 note pattern. So now let's take a look at the 4 note pattern. We're going to apply the same type of concept as we did to the 3 note pattern, but just add 1 more note. So this would make the rhythm 16th notes. So we do 4 16th notes in 1 beat, and I like to use this food group as watermelon. Or when I was in college, my professor would say huckleberry, but I like watermelon better. So watermelon, watermelon, watermelon. So we can make sure it's nice and even. We're going to be building off of each scale degree as well, but apply 4 notes to it. So we would go in the same thing in A minor, the first shape, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, or 6 would be 1. Now what I would do is when I get to that 4th note, I would use a different finger because it's very difficult to switch with your ring finger if you have to roll or you have to pick it up really fast. So to make this nice and smooth, you can just use your 2nd finger, which is not being used. So after you finish that 4, you use your 2nd finger and then reach back up with your 1st finger on the 5th fret of the D. And then you roll the 1st finger down. Use your 2nd finger again. So anytime that you have your ring finger and you're going to be doing a note that's starting with the 4, starting the 4-note pattern on any of the second notes of the scale, you can use a different finger to make it a little bit more fluid. So let's look at it just going forwards. And then going backwards again, we're just going to repeat that top note like we did with the 3-note pattern. Now, if you notice, when I was going backwards, I was actually rolling with my 3rd finger because it's, for me, it's easier to roll from a top note to a bottom note because I'll naturally press on it with a little bit of a flatter rather than arching, which is against the rules. But when you're rolling, it's good to go flat, and then you roll up to that next note and roll backwards. So, and I do the same thing with my 1st finger. Back. So a lot of this has to do with rolling with the 1st and 3rd finger and sometimes your 4th. Now this is a great way to start developing your rolling skills, especially when you're doing whether you're doing your triad arpeggios or your 7th arpeggios. This is a great way to get started to do that. So let's do the scale in its entirety. Okay, and that's the 4-note pattern. And also practice with the metronome. And you can also start doing this at a very slow tempo, setting the metronome to the 8th note to make sure that all of your 16th notes are explicitly and really, really even. And then once you get it up to a nice, comfortable tempo, you can move it back down and set the metronome to the quarter note, and then start doing 4 notes in one beat. And that is the 4-note pattern. So let's take a look at the 5-note pattern. Now this 5-note pattern is going to be using the same rhythm, 16th notes, as the 4-note pattern, but this is going to create a difficulty for 2 reasons. Well, the first reason is time. We know that there's only 4 16th notes in one quarter note. Now we're doing a 5-note pattern, which causes us to bleed into that next beat. So we're going to be starting our new set sometimes in the between beats, maybe on the 2nd 16th note or the 3rd, or sometimes a downbeat. So we have to make sure that we're very even and that we're aware of each downbeat so we land exactly where we need to land. Now the second reason is technique-wise with picking, we are going to be skipping strings this time. So for the 3 and 4-note patterns, we were always starting a new set on an adjacent string, whether it was before or after, going forwards or backwards. Doing the 5-note pattern, we're actually going to be skipping a string and going 2 strings back or 2 strings forward. So that creates an issue as well. So it's very important to make sure you pay attention to your picking, whether you're doing economy or alternate picking, and to pay attention to the time. So it's very, very good to start doing this exercise with the 5-note pattern and doing 8th notes, and then speeding it up back to 16th notes. So let's take a look at it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, and so forth. Okay, so this one doesn't have any rolling per se, but the reason why it's so hard sometimes is because we're skipping the strings. So going backwards, I like to repeat it as well. Okay, and now the scale in its entirety. And obviously you can apply this to all the different shapes. So when you get comfortable with the first shape, then move to the second shape. Now practicing with the metronome again is even more important than the other 2 exercises, the 3-note and the 4-note pattern. So thinking about different ways of how to play your pentatonic scales can be very productive when trying to build your chops. So what I like you to do is when you're practicing with a metronome, really try to lock into that beat, not to rush and not to fall behind. So accent those downbeats. Now the 3 and 4 patterns are a little bit easier because each new set will start on a downbeat. On the 5 pattern, it's a little more difficult because the downbeats will happen either on a set or in between a set. This is very important for us because the more even we are, the better our technique will be and the faster our chops can get. Now this is only some of the ways in which we can play our pentatonic scales. In my later installments, you're going to see different fingerings and different shapes and also different patterns in which we can play our pentatonic scales. So if you'd like to get to know me more, you can check me out on my website below, michaelcarleo.com, for more information. Thanks for checking out this installment. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.